The thing that I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about today is why we need to transform our agricultural system, why regenerative agriculture is good and important. I'm assuming that we are all pretty much on the same page with that. I will say that this feels like one of the biggest challenges of our time, this transformation, and that regenerative agriculture is a really important, holds a lot of promise as an important solution in this world. And because of that, I think investment in regenerative agriculture is an incredible opportunity. But the question is really, how do you actually finance this type of wholesale system level transformation? So this is where systemic investing comes in. This is our working definition, but in very plain language terms, I would say you cannot finance system change with single investments, a single loan, a single piece of infrastructure, a single grant. This is really holistic work, and single investments don't change systems. This is what systemic investing recognizes, which is why that work is all about working with different types of capital together to finance an interconnected portfolio of interventions. And very practically, what it means is that systemic investing is strategic work. It's very much money that's deliberately looking to solve a problem so that you are financing what's needed, not just what's out there. It's contextualized in that it's always very place-based, and these financing solutions are designed in a participatory way so that the capital is connected to needs on the ground. And it's integrated in so much as it's about building community and partnerships with different stakeholder groups so that capital that might be sitting on the sidelines is used and match-made with the right type of solution at the right moment in time. Now, I think most of us know that that is not actually how money moves by and large today. Let me illustrate this for you with an agricultural example, let's say. So if you are looking to support regenerative farming today, and you are, say, an agricultural lender, you might see opportunities for low-cost patient loans that support farmers to make that transition. If you're an infrastructure investor, you might see opportunities to invest in processing facilities. If you are a venture capitalist, you might see opportunities to invest in food startups. If you are a philanthropist, you might see opportunities to invest in technical assistance for farmers. If you are a private equity fund, you might invest in farmland. If you're a local government, you might create public procurement programs that source regenerative food in schools. But the thing is, in order for the transition to happen, all of these things need to happen. And they all need to happen with a sense of shared directionality and in a strategically aligned way. So, in other words, in order to invest with a system change intent, you need to have a system lens on. Only then can you see the full rich picture. Now, if at this point you are thinking, that feels hard, you would be right. I mean, it's no wonder that this stuff is not happening in many ways, because actually, how do you operationalize that kind of work? Who can provide the system intelligence that can sort of inform the ability to see that rich picture? Who can build the investor coalitions that make sure that money is going to the right places? Who can create the learning infrastructure that makes sure that the capital allocators have the information that they need? There is a need for a kind of connective tissue, an entity that can play that coordination and orchestration role. The good news is that this is not entirely unprecedented in the system. So organizations that do this kind of system orchestration exist. They typically convene, coordinate, translate, advocate. And, I'm talking things like C40 in the context of climate and cities, or RE100 in the context of renewable energy. And then on the other hand, you've got impact-led capital allocators, governments, impact investors, foundations, etc. What they do is, control a particular pot of money and understand how to mobilize that money into the asset type that they are used to dealing with. What they don't typically do is convene, coordinate, translate, advocate. And then there is this bit in the middle between system orchestration and capital deployment that is effectively, by and large, missing today. It's a missing piece of infrastructure that is a sort of a financial backbone, if you will, that is able to orchestrate different types of financial capital in service of collective impact mission. Now, a lot of you in this room already know that 20 organizations, most of whom are in the Zoom room today, got together last year to do exactly that, to design a capital orchestrator that can support the regenerative agriculture transition in the Midwest. The work actually started about 3 years ago with this question of how can capital support this transition? And at the time that we started the work, we got asked a lot of the time, why are you doing this work in the Midwest? But why not do the work in the Midwest, I think? Because the Midwest is obviously one of the world's biggest, most productive, most important agricultural regions. And with that productivity, obviously come pressures, environmental, social, economic. But in fact, also comes a massive opportunity for regenerative transformation at scale. And also potentially a kind of blueprint for financing regeneration in other agricultural settings and systems. So the first output from that work was published in 2024. It was this transition map. And this transition map, and hopefully one of the team members will just ping a link to it in the chat so that you can explore it in your own time. This transition map gave us a lot of interesting insight. We looked at blockers and enablers of the transition. We unpicked the relationship between them to understand what the kind of systemic challenges are. And most importantly, we identified really key strategic areas, what we call leverage points, where we need to crowd in capital and other resources to accelerate this transition. Now, the other piece of insight this mapping process yielded was on a slightly different, more meta level. And it was about how money behaves in the system. So, as many of you already know, there is money increasingly flowing into regenerative agriculture, and it's different types of money as well, whether it's public finance, private finance, philanthropic capital, etc. But the thing that's not happening is that these different types of capital allocators are typically not in conversation with each other, much less strategically aligning those capital flows. And this is when we started to think, actually, what if you could do capital coordination on such a level and in such a way that these individual investments have synergies between each other? And what would it look like to build an entity that could do that kind of coordination and orchestration? And this is where this wonderful bunch comes in. So this is our design council. Many of them are here today, which is wonderful. These are the folks that we invited in last year and asked them to come along on this journey, a kind of design journey with us, I guess, where we were looking at how do you actually design an entity that can do that level of capital orchestration. And what we were trying to do with this group was essentially put together a microcosm of the system in a room, obviously not perfect, particularly when you limit it to like just 20 organizations. But we were bringing in both funders and asset managers, but also farmers and farming organizations and nonprofits and academics and CPGs. We really tried to bring in diverse voices from across the system to help us design this financing platform. And that was really deliberate because we think this sort of participatory collective design work is a hallmark of how systemic investing should work. And we took everybody through this process that took the better part of 2025. It involved workshops and sprinting in between. And what I'm about to share with you is actually some of the key collective insights that emerged from that process. So in 2026, the Design Council is hoping to launch the Capital Orchestrator for regenerative agriculture in the Midwest, hopefully with a snappier, better name than that. And its mission is going to be to change the way that money moves through the agricultural system in the region, doing that orchestration of investment capital so that the right kind of money and the right amount moves to the areas of greatest strategic potential and need. Now, we know that the transition of an entire agricultural system is obviously a generational project. And we know that this capital orchestrator is not going to do it on its own. But we also know that a persistent, consistent minority can influence the majority. And what we would really like to do is catalyze social tipping points, create a degree of social contagion, as it's sometimes called, which research shows happens when you get 25% of a particular system acting in a particular way. And then this change becomes self-sustaining and accelerates. So although it's obviously very imperfect, our kind of sense of direction with this, our North Star, is to catalyze the transition of 25% of farmland in the region to regenerative practice over the next 10 years. We've done a bit of rough calculating to cost out what that would mean. And we think that this means deploying some 1.4 billion of catalytic capital in order to also then be able to mobilize and orchestrate an additional 7.5 billion of investment capital that's needed to effect that transition. This is the collective vision that the Design Council rallied around. As you can see, this is a pretty sort of holistic vision. It's got a number of different dimensions to it, from agricultural systems that regenerate ecosystems to creating vibrant rural economies to delivering nutrient-dense foods, verbalize and vocalize what a transition system looks like. And here is what the Capital Orchestrator will do. So these are the sort of key functions that it will deliver to the ecosystem, and its system intelligence, its capital matchmaking, its catalytic finance provision, and its field building. And let me just take a moment to talk about each one of these in turn very briefly. System intelligence, that takes the form of a data platform that will be organized according to those leverage points from the transition map, and will track and share things like indicators of system change, financing flows of all different types in regenerative agriculture in the region, and investment deal flow as well. And that investment deal flow then translates directly into the capital matchmaking program, where the role of the capital orchestrator is to connect different types of capital sources to deals, building investment coalitions around key needs areas, and identifying and creating synergies between individual investments. The capital orchestrator is also going to deploy capital directly, and this is about anchor investing in some of the things that we know are critical for the transition but are challenging to finance, helping to unlock broader investor participation. And then last but not least, because we know that this work can only happen at scale if we bring in a greater quantity of capital and different capital holders, different types of capital holders into the system. There will be convening, investor education, building communities of practice on specific topics, doing the field building work that will sort of build the momentum for the transition. So obviously, pockets of this work already exist in the system. This is not unprecedented in a way. I think the thing that's unique about this model is that it's bringing these key functions together in one place, one space, and that the idea is they work very synergistically together. So you can see how, for example, the system intelligence platform and the data coming out of that feeds the other functions. Obviously, the capital matchmaking can deliver the proof points and case studies of success that's needed in the field building work. The catalytic finance can help anchor investments for key deals. And the field building in general, the idea is it brings more educated investors to the table. The other unique thing about the model, I should say, is in how it's going to be delivered, which is to say in partnership with many other organizations in the ecosystem. So the idea is that this is very much a collective effort with the capital orchestrator sort of coordinating and holding the center. It was also designed by the Design Council to have collective governance. So the idea is it will have a stewardship council. Oops, sorry, my slides are jumping around a bit. A stewardship council, which is very much going to have the same kind of structure and spirit as we had on the Design Council. This is the body that will provide strategic oversight and guidance. But the decision-making of the Stewardship Council is going to be informed by the intelligence and the insights from regional stakeholder consultations. This is very much about ensuring that capital deployment and matchmaking is aligned with needs on the ground. And then there will be a small operational team that runs the capital orchestrator on a day-to-day basis, and an impact investment committee that will be composed of a subset of the Stewardship Council and the backbone team. But because the capital orchestrator will work with a kind of mission-led nonprofit logic, the operationalization of the catalytic fund will actually happen in partnership with a catalytic fund manager, so that there is a kind of regulatory, from a regulatory compliance and expertise point of view, this work is done in partnership, and then the capital orchestrator kind of retains a nonprofit structure. I could say a lot more about this, but I think I've spoken for quite a long time. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute as well. See all your faces again. And I think we have a little bit of time for questions. I'm looking at Hannah and Andre. Yes. Okay, good.